I used to think of home as a safe place, a haven. But that was before Karen. Before the HOA turned into something out of a bureaucratic horror film. And before I realized how fragile peace really is when it's in the hands of control freaks with laminated bylaws and too much time on their hands. It started 3 years before I finally escaped. Back then, my wife and I bought what we thought was our forever home. 2 stories, a quiet yard, a decent school district. Sure, it came with a homeowners association, but I was naive. I thought an HOA meant trimmed lawns, and maybe a newsletter with cookie recipes, not psychological warfare. Karen introduced herself on day 2. She was about 45, platinum blonde bob, yoga pants so tight they looked structural, and a clipboard that probably had more authority in her mind than the United States Constitution. "Welcome to the community," she said with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "I'm the HOA president. We like to keep things orderly here." Orderly meant monthly fines for things like unauthorized wind chimes and non-standard mailbox paint. It meant passive-aggressive letters in my mailbox about yard conformity. But Karen didn't stop at rules. She wielded them like weapons. And I wasn't her only target. I was just the loudest one. Over time, the pressure got worse. Our HOA dues mysteriously tripled over the course of a year, and every time I tried to bring it up at a meeting, Karen cut me off or pretended she didn't hear me. One time she fined us because our trash bins were out 30 minutes too early. Another time it was because my daughter drew chalk art on the driveway. I wish I were kidding. But the real breaking point came one weekend while we were out of town visiting my parents. When we got back, the front door was unlocked. My stomach dropped. Inside, it looked like someone had been snooping. Drawers cracked open, closet doors left ajar. We checked the cameras, and there she was. Karen herself, walking through our living room like she was flipping through clearance items at Target. I confronted her, and she didn't even deny it. Said it was a surprise inspection because she had received anonymous complaints. I nearly lost it. She had no warrant, no permission, not even a courtesy call. She just walked into our house like she owned the damn deed. I hired a lawyer the next morning. Turns out I wasn't alone. Other neighbors, quietly, had similar stories. Fines that didn't match up. Selective enforcement. Karen had been boosting dues for certain families, like mine, and leaving her little inner circle untouched. She ran the HOA like a dictatorship, one with potlucks and baked-in corruption. What she didn't expect was that I'd kept everything, every notice, every fine, video footage, phone recordings, copies of minutes from HOA meetings where my objections were accidentally omitted. I wasn't just angry, I was prepared. The case took months. Karen, smug as hell, strutted into court like she was about to win a PTA election. But when the judge saw the footage of her in our living room, casually flipping through our mail like she was checking her own, the tone changed. When we revealed the dues spreadsheet, mine quadruple that of my neighbors, the judge nearly choked on his gavel. In the end, Karen was ordered to pay us $80,000 in damages for trespassing, harassment, and financial abuse. The HOA board, full of her little minions, had no choice but to remove her pending reevaluation. She was also slapped with community service. I heard they made her clean up graffiti at the park she once banned teens from skating in. Poetic. But to me, the punishment felt light. I had spent years under her thumb. We sold the house a few weeks after the trial. There was nothing left for us there. We moved in with my parents while we regrouped. I worked extra hours, skipped vacations, cut every corner. I had found a place, a gorgeous house with a pool and land, not in the HOA district, but close enough that it had the amenities without the oversight. For almost a year, I saved and planned. The house sat on the edge of the HOA line. I triple-checked. It was not part of any HOA jurisdiction. Free land, no boards, no Karens, just peace. Or so I thought. The day we moved into the new house felt like crossing the finish line after a marathon with barbed wire and landmines. I had never been so physically exhausted and emotionally relieved at the same time. The place wasn't some high-tech mega mansion, just a good, solid two-story home with wide-open space, a modest pool, and a big stretch of backyard where my kids could run wild without Karen trying to fine us for non-standard grass play. It was everything we wanted. More importantly, it was outside the HOA. We'd checked, rechecked, verified with the county records office. The property was on the border, but not under their jurisdiction. I could paint the house neon green and raise a flock of flamingos out back if I wanted to. Freedom had never tasted so good. That morning, a few close friends helped us haul furniture and boxes off the moving truck. My wife set up camp in the kitchen, already organizing like we'd lived there for years. The kids explored the empty upstairs, their voices echoing through the halls. For the first time in a long time, it felt like we were building something real again, without fear of a notice on the door or some HOA representative showing up with a clipboard and passive-aggressive smile. And then she arrived. I was out front unloading a bookshelf when a silver SUV crawled up the street and parked directly across from the house. The window rolled down. Sunglasses. Blonde bob. Lips pursed into a polite, artificial curve. It was Karen. Time stopped for a second. I stood there, frozen, one hand gripping the bookshelf like a club, the other one tightening instinctively. She stepped out of the car, looking like nothing had ever happened. Like we hadn't been in court a year ago. Like she hadn't paid out $80,000 for trespassing into my home. "Good morning," she chirped, walking up the driveway. "Welcome to the neighborhood." "I'm Karen. I didn't say a word, just turned to look at her, dead silent. And I watched it happen. I watched the realization spread across her face like a slow, creeping virus. Her mouth opened slightly. Her eyes flickered, registering the full picture. "You," she breathed. "Yeah," I said flatly. "Me." My friends stopped moving boxes. My wife peeked out the window. You could feel the tension shift in the air, like a thunderstorm hovering just out of sight. Karen blinked, collecting herself, and forced a brittle smile. What are you doing here?" "Moving in," I replied. "This is my house." "No," she said too quickly. "That can't be. This property," she gestured vaguely toward the street, her voice rising a pitch. "This property belongs to the HOA." "No," I said. "It doesn't." She swallowed. "Actually, yes, it does. This house was purchased 2 days ago by the HOA as a community asset. I have the paperwork." I laughed. Actually laughed out loud. "Do you ever get tired of making shit up?" Her expression cracked, but just a little. She glanced at my friends, who were now leaning on boxes like they were watching live theater. Then back at me. "I'm going to need you to stop unloading and vacate the premises while we sort this out," she said, trying to reassert whatever authority she thought she still had. I stepped forward, real calm, real close. "Karen, get in your car and leave. This is my property. I bought it from the previous owner. I have a deed with my name on it, signed, notarized, and recorded. I don't know what fantasy you're operating under, but you have no claim here." To my surprise, she didn't blow up. She didn't scream or call me names. She just smiled. A real cold, robotic smile. Then she turned without a word, walked back to her car, got in, and parked it directly across from the driveway, and sat there. for the next half hour. At first, I ignored her. We kept unloading, though now everyone was on edge. My wife kept glancing out the window. My buddy Evan muttered, "Is she seriously just sitting there? Like a scarecrow with a grudge?" Eventually, I'd had enough. I walked over and tapped on her window. She rolled it down slowly. "Are you stalking me?" I asked. "Just monitoring a potential HOA violation," she replied smoothly, tapping on her phone. "Leave," I said, "or I'm calling the police." She tilted her head. "Funny you should say that." And just like that, a black and white patrol car rolled onto the street. I stepped back, blinking. The officers parked, stepped out, and Karen was on them like glitter on a birthday card, waving her phone and what I assumed were her documents. I stayed on the sidewalk and watched her perform, all calm and cooperative now, all smiles and concerned neighbor tones. Then I heard my name and walked over. She was playing back a recording, my voice heated, telling her to get lost. "She's recording me now?" I said, more to myself than anyone. Karen turned and gave me that same deadpan smile. The officer looked at me. "Sir, can we see your ownership documents?" "Absolutely." I pulled the folder from my glove box. I'd brought it on purpose, just in case, and handed it over. The officer stepped away with his partner to review them. Meanwhile, Karen stood tall, arms crossed, her phone still recording. I turned to her. "You came here trying to intimidate me. Didn't work. You came here trying to claim this house. Didn't work. And now you're hoping to get a clip of me losing it on camera?" "Sorry, sweetheart." "Not today." The officer returned, brow furrowed. "Sir, your documents look valid, but there's a discrepancy. Miss Bradshaw here also has ownership paperwork. We're going to have to take both of you downtown. It's possible one of these documents is falsified." Karen's smug little grin returned in full bloom. But what she didn't realize was I was already calling my lawyer on speaker. He answered on the first ring. "Hey, Steve," I said, never breaking eye contact with Karen. "Yeah, I'm heading to the station." Karen's back. The police station was sterile and over-air-conditioned, the kind of place where even the vending machines looked judgmental. I sat in a hard plastic chair, Karen across from me, fidgeting with her phone like she was trying to summon Satan through a mobile app. I'd been in enough legal messes to know when something stinks, and this situation reeked like a 2-day-old fish market behind a gas station. My lawyer, Steve, arrived within the hour. Sharp suit, sharper mind. The kind of guy who could quote state zoning laws the way most people quote movie lines. He reviewed the situation, the paperwork, the so-called documents Karen had submitted, and I could tell from the look on his face that she was in deeper than she realized. "They've either been duped or they've done the duping," he muttered to me. Karen had brought in a folder, an official-looking one with county stamps and notary marks. It looked legitimate at a glance, but Steve pointed out inconsistencies in the formatting. Wrong font on the headers, a missing seal, and a signature from a notary who died 3 years ago. Meanwhile, my documentation was solid. Verified chain of ownership, original seller's signature, county clerk registration. Everything squared up. And yet, because her papers also looked official, we were both told to remain available, while detectives from the real estate fraud unit got involved. Karen sat there like a cat who had just eaten a canary dipped in caviar. She wasn't even hiding it. And when I met her eyes, she actually winked. I didn't flinch. I knew something she didn't. Steve leaned in and said quietly, "I'm calling a contact at the assessor's office. This smells like inside help." Turns out, he was right. By the next morning, the fraud investigators had already flagged Karen's sale as highly suspect. The LLC that sold the property to the HOA, a group calling themselves Civic Growth Partners, didn't exist in any state registry. Their listed office address? A P.O. box in Nevada that had been closed 6 months ago. The seller's listed phone number was a disconnected burner. It was a shell. Karen had funneled HOA funds, over $250,000, into a fake purchase. Either she was scammed or she'd orchestrated it. Steve and I leaned heavily into the second theory. But here's where it got darker. One of the investigators discovered a set of emails between Karen and a man named Joe L., a mid-level official in the county assessor's office. Joe had access to parcel records and ownership databases, the kind of access that could make fake paperwork seem real, at least for a little while. Turns out, Joe and Karen went way back. High school? Maybe more. In one email, Joe literally wrote, "No one will check that border property. Just register it fast. It'll hold until next cycle." That was enough to trigger an internal review. Joe was suspended. Karen? Still pretending like she was the victim of a real estate scheme. Of course, she immediately spun it to the HOA. She called a meeting, not that I was invited, and told them the whole situation was a massive scam pulled off by the seller. She conveniently left out the part where she bypassed the HOA vote and spent $270,000 without board approval, that she'd promised to turn my home into a shared community resource, a guest house with a pool, sauna, and a rec room for all residents to enjoy. They ate it up, at first. She framed herself as the victim. "I was trying to improve the community," she said, "and these criminals took advantage of that goodwill." Crying on command. Real crocodile stuff. But cracks started to show. A few residents, ones I'd seen quietly observing during my move-in, began asking questions. Why hadn't there been a vote? Why was this the first they were hearing about this supposed guest house? Why had the HOA funds dropped so drastically in the past quarter? I got an anonymous tip from one of them, an email with a photo of an internal HOA financial statement. It showed a transfer of over $270,000 made just days before Karen showed up at my driveway with her documents. The memo line? Property acquisition. Phase 1. That was all Steve needed. We filed an injunction against the HOA to prevent any further interference with my property. The judge approved it within 48 hours. No HOA official, resident, or representative could step foot on my property, attempt contact, or claim ownership in any form until the fraud investigation was complete. Still, my wife and I decided to hold off fully moving in. We stayed part-time, used the house mostly for daytime unpacking and slow prep. The neighborhood felt tense, like everyone was waiting for something to blow. Karen's car, meanwhile, began appearing in random places on the street. Not directly across from the house anymore. That would have violated the order. But just far enough to stay legal. I'd catch glimpses of her parked a few houses down, sipping coffee, scrolling through her phone, just watching, like a villain in a B-movie who hadn't realized her script was already being rewritten. Steve, on the other hand, was on fire. He began compiling a case not just against Karen, but against the HOA as an entity. Financial mismanagement, abuse of power, illegal property acquisition, conflict of interest, misuse of dues. "This is bigger than just your house," he said one night over the phone. "She's been playing emperor for years. It's time we burn her little kingdom down." And I agreed. But we both knew someone was going to snap first. We officially moved in a week after the injunction was granted. There were still boxes in the garage and curtains missing from half the windows, but it was ours. Fully, legally, undeniably ours. And Karen couldn't do a damn thing about it. On paper, at least. But something about the silence didn't sit right. The first few nights were quiet. Too quiet. The kind of quiet where you know someone's holding their breath just out of sight. My wife kept asking if we should put up a tall privacy fence, but I told her to hold off. We needed visibility right now, not a wall to hide behind. Besides, we'd already installed 4 high-resolution cameras, all motion-activated, covering every inch of the yard. That turned out to be the smartest thing I did. It started with the mailbox, a thick envelope with no return address. Inside, there was a crudely printed note in bold, capital letters. Get out while you still can. No signature, just a small smear of something brown in the corner. Chocolate? Dirt? Blood? I didn't want to know. The next day, someone egged our garage door. Then came the broken lawn lights, the slashed garden hose, a trash bag full of dead fish dumped over our back gate. Always small things, petty and juvenile, but unmistakably intentional. My wife was rattled. My kids were scared. I was pissed. I went to the police with the footage. Grainy clips of hooded figures sneaking onto the property. One of them tripped and fell, face hitting the ground, mask slipping, just for a second. It was enough. Local guy, mid-30s, homeowner, part of the HOA. He was arrested the same night, charged with trespassing and vandalism, claimed it was a prank, said Karen had nothing to do with it. But then came the flash drive. It was left in our mailbox in a plain white envelope marked, "For your eyes only." No note, just the drive. I plugged it into an old laptop, half expecting it to explode, but what I found made my stomach turn. Recordings, screenshots, chat logs, private messages from the HOA's internal group chat, a Slack-like app they used for community coordination. Except they weren't talking about bake sales or lawn maintenance. They were talking about me. Messages like, "He's bluffing. He won't last a month. We should make it uncomfortable enough that he leaves." Karen said we can't touch the house directly, but the pool's fair game. Chlorine bomb, maybe. One message from a user named KBRADSHAWADMIN read simply, "Pressure makes people move. Turn up the heat." I forwarded it all to Steve, and he nearly choked on his coffee. "This isn't just harassment," he said. "This is conspiracy." We amended the lawsuit that night. Now it wasn't just against Karen, it was against the HOA itself, as a legal entity, and multiple members personally. Harassment, property damage, incitement, trespassing, and targeted psychological intimidation. The judge issued an emergency no-contact order. Every named resident in the complaint was barred from contacting me or my family, stepping onto our property, or even parking on our side of the street. We added signs to the lawn. Private property. Under surveillance. Trespassers will be prosecuted. Then someone tried to poison the pool. Caught on camera. A man in a hoodie, climbing over the back fence at 3 a.m, carrying a bottle of greenish liquid. He opened the pool filter panel and poured the contents in, but not before slipping and dropping the bottle. He left fingerprints. They got him the next day. He confessed everything, said it was Karen's idea, claimed she told them it was symbolic, that they needed to make the pool unusable so the house would lose its shine. He even said she gave him a prepaid Visa card for cleaning supplies. That was enough for the police to get a warrant. They searched Karen's home, found notes, lists, a whole file labeled reclamation strategy, like she was launching a corporate takeover, not stalking a family. Inside were names, numbers, diagrams of my house, and a hand-drawn floor plan with scribbles like "weak spot in fence" and "camera angles." She was arrested that afternoon, charged with conspiracy to commit vandalism, incitement, and violation of the restraining order. But it didn't stop there. The arrest triggered a domino effect. Another resident came forward. Then another. Then a third. Each one had received messages from Karen pressuring them to do their part. One man had been promised reduced HOA dues if he helped with recovery efforts. Another woman confessed that she'd been afraid of Karen, said the HOA had become like a cult under her leadership. Meanwhile, HOA records started leaking. Turns out, Karen had spent more than $400,000 in unvoted expenditures over the past 2 years. Home improvements that didn't exist, consultant fees to companies that had no websites, maintenance on a non-existent community center. All of it smoke and mirrors. The residents were stunned, some furious, others scared, a few still loyal, convinced it was all deep state propaganda or something equally stupid. But the damage was done. The facade was cracking. And I was just getting started. I woke up to the sound of the fire alarm screaming like a banshee on crack. It was just after 3 in the morning, and my first thought was that it was another false alarm. A glitch. Maybe the battery was dying, or a spider had decided to cozy up inside the sensor. But then came the smell. Acrid, sharp, unmistakable. Burning wood. My wife was already on her feet, eyes wide, grabbing our youngest from the crib while I threw open the bedroom door. A thick gray haze was creeping up the stairs. I bolted down and saw it. Flames licking the front door like they were hungry for more. The porch was on fire. I grabbed the extinguisher from the kitchen and unloaded the whole damn canister into the blaze before the fire department even arrived. The door was scorched, the welcome mat reduced to a black, bubbling puddle. If we'd woken up 10 minutes later, the whole house might have gone up. The firefighters were quick, efficient, and politely skeptical, until I showed them the footage from the security cameras. A hooded figure, face covered, approached the front steps carrying what looked like a homemade Molotov cocktail. Glass bottle, rag, the whole cliché. He lit it, hesitated, then hurled it at the door and sprinted off. But here's the kicker. We caught his car. Our street is a dead end, and we had a motion cam mounted on the tree facing the entrance. His plates were visible, clear as day. The police ran them. The car was registered to a man named Derek Langston, one of the 10 residents we'd named in the harassment suit. Derek was arrested within hours. At first, he denied everything, claimed his car had been stolen, then said he'd lent it to a cousin, then cracked under pressure when he realized we had his face half revealed by the porch light. He spilled. Karen had told him it was a symbolic gesture, that we were trying to destroy the community, that if we stayed, others would follow, people who didn't care about rules, who would ruin the culture of the neighborhood. She hadn't explicitly told him to set fire to our house, but she'd said things like, "Someone needs to send a message," and "heat gets things moving." Derek also mentioned that Karen had been paranoid, said she was losing control. She thought people inside the HOA were starting to turn on her, that someone had leaked the financials, that the traitors would be exposed and dealt with. With his statement and the attempted arson charge, the pressure on the HOA exploded. More residents came forward, suddenly eager to distance themselves. Several anonymously submitted recordings of Karen during closed-door meetings. In one clip, she openly called me a virus and instructed board members to find creative ways to isolate the problem. But the biggest bombshell came from someone I didn't expect, Linda Carver. She'd been Karen's right hand for years, vice president of the HOA, the one who handed out warnings at block parties and measured grass length with a damn ruler. Linda walked into the police station and handed over a flash drive. the HOA's internal financial ledger. The real one. Not the sanitized version they'd been showing residents. It was bad. Over $500,000 gone over the last 4 years. Fake companies, inflated contracts, payments to consultants with no names attached, and a recurring payment labeled internal operations, which turned out to be Karen's personal slush fund, used for spa trips, travel, and what appeared to be hush money. The DA got involved. Suddenly, this wasn't just a case of harassment and fraud, it was public corruption. Karen's position as HOA president might have been unofficial in terms of government, but the amount of community funds misused brought it into criminal territory. They raided her house the next morning. Karen didn't go quietly. According to a neighbor who watched the whole thing from their porch, she screamed about conspiracies and deep state setups. She tried to slap one of the officers. They cuffed her and shoved her into the back of a cruiser while she kicked the window and screamed that, "The community needs me!" And just like that, the self-proclaimed queen of conformity was headed for arraignment. But even with her gone, things didn't settle down. The HOA was imploding. Their bank accounts were frozen. Their leadership structure collapsed. People were calling emergency meetings in garages and backyards, trying to figure out what to do. But there was no fixing it. The whole foundation was rotten. Steve called me the next afternoon. "We're adding corporate dissolution to the civil suit," he said. "This HOA is done, and when we're finished, there won't be a single board member left who isn't facing charges." I didn't say anything at first, just stared at my front door, still half-burned and covered in soot. The smell of smoke lingered, even after the cleaning crew had come through. But behind the charred door, my family was safe. My house still stood. And Karen, for the first time in years, was gone. At least, for now. The courtroom smelled like old paper and sour coffee. The kind of place where lives get sorted into folders and egos get stapled to evidence. It had been almost 3 months since the fire, long enough for the front door to be replaced, the pool to be drained and scrubbed, and the neighborhood to morph into something quieter, more cautious. But inside that room, the silence had teeth. Karen sat at the defense table, flanked by 2 attorneys who looked like they charged by the breath. Her hair was straighter than I remembered, darker too. No more platinum flare. Probably hoping to look more professional or less recognizable. But nothing could hide that face, that tight jaw, that venomous calm. She didn't look at me. Not once. Across from her, Linda Carver sat with her own lawyer, eyes down, lips pressed together. The other 9 HOA members we'd named in the suit were scattered along the benches, some trying to avoid eye contact, others stone-faced, like extras in a bad courtroom drama. Steve stood beside me, calm as ever, papers in one hand, steel in his voice. "Today's the first hearing," he whispered, "but they already know they've lost. This is cleanup." The charges were staggering for Karen alone. Conspiracy, fraud, criminal mismanagement of HOA funds, incitement to commit vandalism, and reckless endangerment. Her bail had been denied after the fire, and as discovery continued, more charges piled up. Joe L., her little buddy from the assessor's office, had already flipped. He'd struck a deal, full cooperation in exchange for a reduced sentence. He testified that he'd helped modify property records in exchange for favors. What kind of favors, the court didn't detail, but his face during questioning said enough. The prosecution presented everything: the fake sale of my house, the internal HOA financials, the chat logs, the audio recordings, the flash drive Linda handed over, even Derek's tearful confession about the firebomb. Piece by piece, the puzzle came together until it stopped being a picture. It became a weapon. Karen's defense tried to spin it, of course. They argued she had been manipulated by civic growth partners, that she was trying to revitalize the neighborhood, that she had no idea about the fire, that all of it was just miscommunication and overzealous leadership. But nobody bought it, especially not the judge. She sat there, stony-eyed, while the prosecution read through the financial statements line by line. You could feel the weight of every dollar misused. Every family in that neighborhood who'd paid dues thinking they were supporting community gardens and maintenance, when instead they'd been funding Karen's personal reign. Then came the best part. The court ordered the HOA officially dissolved. A forensic accountant declared it structurally and financially unsalvageable. All remaining funds were seized for redistribution to affected homeowners, myself included. Karen was personally liable for restitution and damages. The other 9 members? Fined. Some got probation, others community service. A few might still see jail time depending on further investigations. Karen? Sentenced to 3 years in prison. No parole in the first 18 months. The gavel fell like thunder. She didn't scream. She didn't cry. She didn't beg. She just sat there, motionless, like someone who finally realized the costume no longer worked. The crown was gone, the clipboard snapped in half, and no HOA bylaws were coming to save her. I walked out of that courtroom free, truly free. But I wasn't smiling. Not yet. 3 months after the trial, the neighborhood felt different, quieter, lighter. No flyers taped to doors about unauthorized mailbox colors. No 6 a.m. citations about overgrown hedges. Just people watering lawns, walking dogs, waving again like human beings instead of surveillance drones in yoga pants. I finally finished setting up the patio. My kids were back to swimming, this time without anyone threatening to test the chemical levels. My wife planted sunflowers along the side of the house, her quiet middle finger to the scorched porch we'd left behind. The cameras were still up, of course, but now they felt like decoration, insurance, not a necessity. I got a check in the mail, restitution, just under $35,000. Not the full $80,000 Karen had been ordered to pay. Not yet. But enough to replace the front door, repaint the house, and finally buy that ridiculous fireproof mailbox I'd been joking about. But the real gift came one morning as I was sipping coffee out back, scrolling through local news. There it was. Former HOA president denied early release after prison altercation. Apparently, Karen had tried to start some kind of cleanliness committee inside the prison. Tried to find another inmate for improper bunk maintenance. Got punched in the mouth. Required stitches. The article quoted a guard saying, "She's learning that prison doesn't do bylaws." I laughed so hard I nearly dropped my mug. Later that week, I got a knock on the door. It was Linda Carver. She looked like a completely different person. No clipboard, no smugness. Just a quiet woman holding a pie. Apple, from the smell of it. "I owe you an apology," she said, "for a lot of things." We talked for a while. She admitted she'd known it was wrong, but Karen had something on everyone. Fear, dirt, promises. It was like a cult, she said. But not anymore. Before she left, she looked out at my backyard and said, "You built something better. Not just a house. You tore the whole rotten thing down," I thanked her. Took the pie inside. That night, we grilled on the patio, watched the kids swim, and toasted to our future. No fines, no forms, no Karen, just peace. And maybe, just maybe, the faint sound of screaming from a very, very clean prison cell.